I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lois, can you read the statement of certification of the meeting?
Certification of the meeting has been advertised according to Sunshine Law.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Venero.
Here.
Mr. Zungri.
Here.
Mrs. Inaugurato.
Here.
Councilman Kennedy. Mr. Conti.
Here.
Mr. Walsh.
Here.
Mrs. Shaw.
Here.
Mr. Medikini.
Here.
Mr. Coviello. Mr. Anello. Mr. Harretts.
Here.
Mrs. Tavito.
Here.
And Mr. Di Lorenzo.
Do I have a motion for the approval of the minute for the October 9, 2014?
So moved.
Second.
Lois, call the roll.
Mr. Venero.
Yes.
Mr. Zungri.
Yes.
Mrs. Inaugurato.
Yes.
Mr. Conti.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw. Yes. Mr. Medikini.
Yes. Correspondence and payments of bills. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Old business?
Mr. Chairman, I have some old business in reference to the Claremont construction and the recent incident with the crane. I'd like to know exactly when this planning board, when it came before us, actually.
That was the zoning board that went in front of Patty.
It did.
Yes.
That's what I thought. I'd like to know, really, because it seems like this section, the Claremont section in town seems to be somewhat neglected because there was 4 water problems within the last 2 years. And quite frankly, I'm tired of being without water. So, I mean, in 4 years, I'm curious to find out, was there an engineer on site? Was there a project manager on site? And then I heard rumors that they were told not to move the crane in a certain area, and they did anyway.
That's correct.
That's correct. Will we be citing them?
We will be back charging them for everything. They've already accepted, they've already come to the office looking for their back charges.
Well, I mean, I think we should really, really come down on that fairly hard due to the fact that their parking garage collapsed at one point, and now we have this incident. So whatever we can do, I would stress we do it to the max.
Or whatever the parking garage is done, so the crane it should be gone by now.
I have a question to back that up. Originally, the parking garage came before planning in its construction and its approval, correct? Correct.
Correct, the
Yeah.
first one, when it collapsed.
Yes. But the first one as it was proposed to us as a plan with the levels, correct. So therefore, instead of, when they went for this expansion, why didn't they come back to the planning board? Why did they go
I
to
just
zoning?
explained it, they went to the zoning board,
Yeah, but
Patty.
why?
Because it's conditional use, you understand the conditional use, if they don't meet the conditions, they go in front of the zoning board.
Because it was in conjunction with the they're building in front of the, there's a addition building going on in the front.
201 beds to put on in front.
Okay.
So so the reason the architect came in because they needed to add parking to the site. So the parking was part of the application for the addition in the front.
But the parking had to do with the buildings that originally came in front of us.
So they needed additional parking because of the square footage that they're putting onto the hospital, so they added onto the parking deck. That's as far as the parking deck can go. It's maxed out now.
I understand, and perhaps Counselor will refresh me when you have the time as to why this went to the other board. Not that I
I just
have an
explained
objection.
it.
I understand, but
It's a conditional use, they don't meet the
Rose-
conditions, you go to the zoning.
I know, but Rose is great at putting it into simple terms that I can understand.
I have no problem explaining that to you.
Thanks.
We can spend a little time with it.
Great, thank you, I appreciate it. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Resolutions, Lois, we got any resolutions?
No, we don't have it.
Okay, under new business, the mayor and municipal council would like the planning board to review an ordinance amending chapter 23, a zoning ordinance of the township of Belleville establishing minimum parking spaces exception. Tom, you want to just,
Yeah, there's situations throughout the township where, because of the way the zoning was years ago, they had to built the garages lower than the street level. And that was because the way the ordinance was written, you could only go so high, and if you had the garage above the street level, you would have required a variance. So people, to get aware, they didn't want to apply for the variance, they just buried the garage. And it's a flooding problem for a lot of people. Frederick Street's one, there's another person down on Portland Street. So the easiest solution for some of these people is to block off the garage door and fill in their driveways. The problem becomes is that the ordinance is written that you have to have 2 parking spaces, and one of them has to be in a garage for a 1- and 2-family house. So in order to give these people relief, because they're only going to be able to have 1 car parked now in the driveway, that's why we came up with this ordinance.
okay. Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
Maybe you can answer. I know on Geraldo Street, for years, there's been flooding problems. And I'm just curious, I mean, whether they fill up the hole or whatever that they're going to do, I still don't think the problem is going to be solved in that area. It might help a little.
No, this isn't meant to, I know there's
That's why I think we should fix the problem.
but this is a problem where it's flooding the individual house, okay?
They've
So
had that problem.
this is no cost to the township. These people are doing this on their own because it just added
Because
up
they're
to
fed
here.
up,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the location, it's on my street, and the people, I think it's 3 or 4 times, had their basement under 3 feet of water.
Yeah,
When it rains, the water comes down the curb line, goes over the curb, floods out their basement, the boiler, the hot water heater. They're really nice people, they're at their wits' end, and I think when we did the master plan reevaluation, we allowed for higher buildings so that people can put parking
Well,
on
the
street
ordinance
level.
is done, the ordinance was revised.
So moving forward, you know, when people build a house,
It won't
the
happen.
parking won't be underneath like that. It was really,
It's common sense.
yeah, the driveways were such a steep angle, I don't know if anybody could have got the cars in anyway. So moving forward, the master plan allows them to go a little higher, put the parking at street level and build you 2 stories over it. Anybody else have any questions? Anybody in the public? If not, would someone like to make a motion to approve this ordinance?
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Well, you're recommending that the council approve this ordinance, that's what you're basically
If you
doing.
want to add anything to it or take it out, you can do it at this point, send it to the council.
So we recommend that we're going to send this to council.
Unless you want to change something on it or
No.
delete it or add something, it's up to you guys.
No, I
You know.
don't think so.
Well, it's like a clarification on the back, maybe it says that, it has to be basement space and can it be livable space to the homeowner? I'm not saying.
Mr.
to
Di
just-
Lorenzo, could you answer that?
Yeah, they won't.
Well, yeah, they're just saying that they don't want any dwelling units, another dwelling
I
unit
agree.
there, and they just say it has to be used as a basement space.
So whatever people normally use their basements for, that would continue.
Recreation or whatever, no dwelling.
Okay,
That's all, yeah.
so we get a second?
Yes.
Lois, would you call the roll?
Mr. Venero,
Yes.
Mr. Zumbra.
Yes.
Mrs. Inaugurato.
Yes,
Mr. Conti.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw.
Yes.
Mr. Medikini.
Yes.
Applications before the board. We have the continuation of the Northeast redevelopment plan comprised of blocks 9101, lots 9, 10, and 14, block 9103, lot 1, block 1002, lot 1, and a portion of block 9002, lot 1. We had closed the public portion of the redevelopment plan at the last meeting. So right now, if any of the board members have any further questions they'd like to ask at this time? Arlene?
I need a clarification. Is the parking, if you remember last meeting I raised it, is the parking one bedroom? I believe that was my concern. If there was more than one bedroom.
One space
would
per
there
bedroom?
be a- Would there be a parking space per
I think
bedroom?
we should refer that to Mr. Madden.
My understanding, and I think the property owners slash potential redevelopers are here. My understanding that they've agreed to parking spaces per unit, at least.
Per bedroom?
Per bedroom.
Oh, well, no, per unit,
Which means?
which means one per bedroom.
Oh, all right. All right.
Right, but
Per bedroom
overall
or per
two.
unit?
In other words, overall two, because
Because there will
there'll be
only
some
be
three
two
bedrooms.
bedrooms. Is that, am I correct, there will not be any three bedrooms?
Yes, there will be.
There will be three bedrooms, or there will?
Well, here's another thing that the developer, not the property owner, has proffered. Rather than have, what we have is an average of 2 units per acre.
Two bedroom units.
Two bedroom units. Maybe it's better, if he explains what he thinks is a better solution. Mr. Bishop?
Over here.
Why don't you explain what you're proposing as a better solution than an average of 2?
Do you need to swear me in?
Just
I
before,
already was, but
one second, just before Mr. Bischoff starts, the only thing I want to make clear is, this is not an application before the board. This is a plan, and this is just Mr. Bischoff's suggestion
Right.
with regard to that plan.
Right.
Thank you.
But it would answer what.
I understand, I just want to make sure everybody understood that.
what is it?
Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
State your name again, please.
Richard Bischoff.
Thank you.
What I had said to John was that when we first met, we thought the easiest thing was to just say, well, we'll go with an average of 2 bedrooms per unit. And that become an issue with school and whatnot. So I think you have a document that Mr. Steck had prepared in October that outlined what we thought the actual bedroom mix would be. And it came up with an average of about 1.3 bedrooms per unit. Because we'll have studios, we'll have 1 bedrooms, we'll have 2 bedrooms. The majority of the units will be 1 bedrooms and studios. So I had said to John that we'd agreed to go with a lower average number of bedrooms per unit. We could live with 1.75 as an average, which would have an impact on the number of school-age kids. And, we agreed to that. We thought that just saying two bedrooms on average made it simple for everybody, but it became a big issue thinking that they're all going to be 2 bedrooms. But I think 75% of them will be 1 bedroom.
Now, what about the parking?
On the parking, I think Tony had explained to you that we're already going to be over parking, building more parking spaces than we need. So we'd agreed to do 1 parking space for every bedroom. So if that meant we were going with 1.75 bedrooms and we have 1,000 units, you could have at least 1,750 parking spaces as opposed to what Mr. Madden's plan initially said, 1 bedroom, 1 parking space per apartment.
Right.
Now we'll go with 1 parking space for every bedroom, which would, because I think Patty or Arlene had said, well, everybody knows if you have a 2 or a 3 bedroom, that means there's a husband and wife and you're gonna have 2 cars. So we're fine with that kind of a condition if you wanted to make that an amendment or whatever.
All right, well, that's,
Does that explain it?
Got that?
did that explain it?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I've got one other. Mr. Steck said something on, in his statement, I think it was on page, it says, why don't you kind of, there's a concern about the first 4 acres and then relate it to density.
Right, I can explain that.
And then we have further paperwork to explain it. And just for myself, is that 4 acres included?
No, it's not included in the calculation of density and floor area. They are saying there, in other words, that is land that is in the flood area, and therefore, we've excluded it. And they would like to have it included in the density calculations and in the FAR calculations. And I think that's something that either this board could take a position on, or the council, or it could be subject to the redevelopment agreement. But my thinking is that this area, my understanding is it floods. We really aren't we're not going to put any structures in it. The state has a no net fill requirement in flood areas. So therefore, I don't see how you could build in that area under the state rules. So that's why we excluded it. So some FAR requirements do include the total land area. What I've done is deliberately excluded it.
What's FAR?
Floor area, in other words, the amount of floor area, literally the amount of development you could have on the property. In other words, floor area is, in this case, 50 stories of floors, So they're not getting any credit that could be used to increase the density by having that 44 acres.
Even though this is a concept plan, it is 50, I thought that there was some, I heard that there was something less, they weren't going to 50.
50 stories.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
We're being asked to approve these 3 options,
Correct.
right? As a package.
Not approved, not approved.
Or send to council.
Send the council with your comments, right?
And I recall Mr. Reagan saying that he was not interested in anything less than 50 stories on Washington Avenue. This package is 20 stories on
That's
Washington.
correct, right.
Is he not interested in this package?
I can't answer for him.
I need to know because we're not approving, we're sending to the council 50 stories on Washington Avenue. He made it pretty clear that without 50 stories, he wasn't interested in the development.
Well, I think that's a question that you have to pose to them, you need an
I
answer.
intend on, because that's a starting point for us, because there are some limitations that the board wants to put on this.
Right, but just to be clear, that's not what the plan says. So, in other words, first of all, the thing you have to decide is consistency with the master plan. That's the number one thing you gotta do tonight. Second thing is your comments, your conditions, and if you want to ask them questions about whether or not option 3 is a no-go, that's certainly, you're right, I can't answer that question. All I can say is, this is the plan I prepared,
Right.
and
Part of the redevelopment is 20 stories.
20 stories, right?
I'm just
Yeah.
referring back to a comment that Mr. Reagan made, saying that he wasn't interested in the development that didn't include 50-story buildings on Washington Avenue.
If I could.
Yeah.
Mr. Conti's question is based on a comment that Mr. Reagan made. Mr. Reagan has a partner, and he's already spoken tonight. If you would like, I can recall Mr. Bischoff, and he can respond to your question. It seems like you're interested in having that occur. Is that okay, Mr.
That's
Chairman?
fine.
Mr. Bischoff, would you please respond to Mr. Conti's question with regard to the number of units along the top of the
I don't recall Tony saying that it was a deal breaker if it wasn't 50 stories, but we've had conversations with Mr. Madden since the meeting, and we'd agreed to, 375 feet along Washington Avenue, which is a sizable reduction in what we were envisioning there. What I think Tony had explained was that Washington Avenue is where we really feel that we've got to put our best foot forward. We understand what Mr. Madden's outlined for the lower 24 acres. But you know, the development is really situated or centers around what we do on Washington Avenue. That's where we'll have our retail space, that's where we'll have our train platform, that's where we'll have all the other things. And so that's important to have some synergy there.
But that still is a departure from this plan.
Right, well, Mr. Madden suggested that there'd be 20, he's recommending 20 stories or 275, and so we said, okay, we'll go with 375. I mean, it's still your call, and, you know, we still would have to discuss with.
Thank you, I see. That's what before.
Just want to make it clear, I did have a conversation with him, but what I've asked him, in other words, I've asked him to present substantially more data. I don't really understand what the difference in height is. One of the things that they told me is that they want to put a lot more non-residential in this Washington Avenue phase. Remember, I'm only requiring something like 80,000 square feet of non-residential space in the first phase. They're proposing a lot more. How much more? I've asked him to document, I've asked him to know, for example, what are the floor to ceiling heights, what do the floor plates look like. So before I could say what this additional height means in terms of, in other words, he's saying that he could do 20 stories, but he wants to have a little more give, which probably makes sense. If you're going to have restaurants and offices, you're not going to have residential ceiling heights. So that's where we're at now. So I'm not endorsing what he says, but nor am I saying that it's a non-starter.
And again, we're not saying, my client is not saying that he's not going to do it if he doesn't get 50 stories on Washington Avenue. He's expressing his concern about the importance of starting the project on Washington Avenue and being able to put his best foot forward. And that's why they have a particular opinion. Now, Mr. Bischoff has indicated they would be satisfied, let's use that phraseology, if the board were to see fit to increase the height to 375 on Washington Avenue as opposed to the 20 stories that are there now. But again, we understand that this is the board's recommendation to the governing body, and that eventually, should this go forward and we be appointed to the developer and a development agreement be entered into, we'll be back before this board with specificity. But for our input, for my client's input, we are interested in the 375 along Washington Avenue, again, because of the importance they feel about that location, both as the commercial space and residential space.
Answer Mrs. Shore's question.
Certainly.
Mrs. Shore asked a question about the 4 acres on the lower part. It's actually 8 acres, and it's below the approximate flood line. And in development, that's called, you see what they call wet lots all the time, where somebody might have a lot that's 40 by 80 and half of it's in wetlands. Well, they can't build in that, but they're still allowed to use the square footage of the lot to develop their overall lot coverage percentages and all that. And on this particular property, when you approved Lowe's in 2007, you took the entire 23.7 acres and used all that acreage to figure out the calculations. We understand what Mr. Madden says, there's DEP and all sorts of regulations about what can be built in that area, and we're going to totally comply with that. We don't intend to have any structures in that area. But the square footage is very important to us in developing our FAR numbers, developing our density numbers, because if you take 8 acres out of the 24, you effectively took 1/3 of our property, and what good is it for us? I mean, we bought it, you've now taken it away for us, we can't use it for anything. I mean, it's not even our property anymore. So that was just what Mr. Steck had tried to explain in his testimony on at the first meeting.
Once again, when we approve this package, there's recommendations of units, how many units. And I understand that your original plan was to go above the 4,500 units. So in trying to get that 8 acres to be considered, you want to be able to add floor space or potential units. How many units do you see building on this site? Do you have a number?
Well, the rendering that is included in Mr. Steck's plan, which is totally conceptual and would probably take, 15 years to build, that shows like 8 buildings with 500 or 600 units in each building. So if you took the whole thing 15 years from now, it could be 6,000 units. It could be.
This is where I become a little confused, because we're going to vote as a body to take Mr. Madden's report and refer it to the council. It doesn't say anything about 6,000 units. We wanted to limit it from 45 units in this report down to 4,000 units. I have a problem with the density. I do. I have a personal problem with the density. Where I came from, they called it the projects. When you put, listen, it could be high-end, and I see the dream and I see that vision, I do. Mr. Reagan spoke about it. I wanted a unit there. There's also a reality, and I know it's a long-term project too, but you're gonna put, I was telling the chairman, I drive on Boulevard East. From Weehawken into Fort Lee, there's not that many 25-story buildings in the 6-mile drive. I think it's a big deal what we're about to vote on, because I'm very agreeable, and I am, and I'd love to see it develop, and I do see part of the vision. And I would maybe have as much of a problem with it if it was 2 towers and then some lower buildings. We're talking about 50-story towers in the back, and 20, 30-story towers in the front on a 20-acre parcel.
Well,
It's a lot.
the
And
rendering
so-
is-
and then you're thinking, you're going to 6,000 units. So what are we approving here? I don't know even what we're approving. What are we approving? Your plan seems to be different than this plan. How far can we
But just-
stray from this plan?
Mr. Gotti, just so we understand, you're approving your plan, not our
Yeah.
plan.
We don't have to consider what they want. I mean, we're considering Mr.
You're
Madden's
approving your plan.
recommendation.
Right.
But though, I just would like to respond to one thing, and that's and I tried to talk about this last month. That's the concept that this could be a project. You will never see something of this magnitude without it being something special, because you'll never get the financing
Right.
unless it's something special, beginning to end. This is a unique concept. My clients have a vision. They've convinced me of their vision. And they've obviously invested a lot in that vision. This is not somebody with just a dream without supporting it and buying property and having contracts with regard to the other properties. So they have a vision, and it's up to the board to see if you will give them the opportunity to try to fulfill their vision. But again, what they're looking for and what you decide, that's what they would like to have. If you make a recommendation, hopefully to the governing body has a subcommittee they appointed. Hopefully they would meet with my clients and discuss it, but they may reduce what you send them or increase what you send them. But if there's any other questions, we'd like to try to answer them before.
Just, Mr. Conley, I think our recommendation would be for the plan for Mr. Madden. I mean, with all due respect, what they want to do, they can discuss that with the council. What we're going to vote on is Mr. Madden's plan as presented. And we have some conditions that we had discussed, so.
Which one of the conditions was the limitation on the units? That's why when I hear 6,000 units, and we're looking at pushing the other direction, I don't want to waste your time, and I'm not so sure that,
This is-
like you said, it's up to the governing body.
This is the first step of a many-step process.
Well, the governing body is certainly going to take your recommendation into consideration. They're the ultimate decider on this. But what we're looking for is to allow as much flexibility as you're willing to allow to give my clients the chance to develop something special at this location. They have a tremendous vision with regard to railroad stop, special-looking buildings, tremendous shopping, etc. So it would be an absolutely phenomenal thing for Belleville, should their vision be able to be fulfilled, even to a great extent, not even to the fullest extent. So we're looking for the opportunity to have a chance, and I'm repeating the words, to have a chance to fulfill this vision.
Let me answer Arlene's thing about the FAR too, because the FAR helps check what you're talking about. If we have an FAR, which is floor area ratio, which is a multiple of the size of the lot, you can't do one and the other. You're doing a combination of, say it's 1 million square feet. Well, the residential part gets deducted from that, and that's what you're left over with. As Mr. Madden said, He's proposing 80,000 square feet on the front. Most developers you drag them to the finish line and force them to put in other things other than the units. We want to have this. We want to have office space. We want to have restaurants. We want to have other things like that. So the FAR gives you that check. You know, down the road, we may have a client who wants an office building, you know? If they want an office building, well, you're going to get an office building that's going to have offices, and you're not going to have all those units. You might see that. Somebody may say, oh boy, there's good living here. We want a 5-story, a 10-story office building. We change our plan. We don't know what, I mean, it's just a vision right now. But those kind of things, that's why you don't want to have a restrictive FAR, and you don't want to take the 8 acres away from that calculation. You'll still have it shot at us every time we come here for site plan for the next 15 years.
The other thing I just want to point out lastly, there will be, should this be approved, eventually a developer appointed and a development agreement. That development agreement can cover a wide array of conditions, requirements, etc. And that's the way the governing body and this board would control what would go there despite what is set forth in the plan. We have to meet all of those conditions that you require in the development agreement.
I'd just like to make one additional comment. I really forgot or didn't think about the Lowe's, even though I sat on it years ago, but we did allow that land to be used. I don't think that that low land should be used, obviously, for residential, but at the same time, if it's part of the package that say that it can't be used for anything, when we have a record that we allowed another commercial enterprise, which was Lowe's at the time, to calculate that land. So I just want for the record to say that it's something, I don't see how that land could be totally excluded, because in past practice, we did include it, in fact, for construction. And the other comment I've got to make is that we shouldn't be, if this is what the comment that's being made about the flexibility of the plan, then we shouldn't just include residential. That there should be flexibility in allowing business to be in there if it presents itself. Is it? Okay, I'm sorry, I missed it. All right, I'm done. Sorry.
Just so the board knows that with the Lowe's, the front portion of the property they used that was basically their stormwater management stuff. They had detention basins and there was a big green area.
Any other members have any questions? The planning board had a subcommittee meet on 3 separate occasions, and we came up with several recommendations for the Northeast redevelopment plan. And they were as follows: that 10% of the units can only be 3 bedrooms. That a helipad is not an accessory use. Any use which is not classified as permitted shall be considered a prohibited use. That they name a redeveloper as soon as possible. That the total number of dwelling units be limited to 4,000 units. That 35% be open space, and that 55% be building area. So in addition to Mr. Madden's Northeast redevelopment plan, we have these following conditions as listed that we would like to make part of the plan.
I believe that we're saying 2 bedrooms and not 3 bedrooms. Even though we said 3, can we limit it down to 2?
We want to leave them some option.
Well, okay, but this way it puts a control on the number of
There would only be a
potential
maximum,
students.
only a maximum of 10%.
Okay.
There's a few things that I would like included if this board feels necessary. This is the time.
I guess, go ahead.
I'd like included the fire training and any necessary equipment would be included in the future. I also would like to see that any type of funding for schools, after say, be a first priority as a bonus for say 5 years after their capacity and how it would affect us. Also, I would like included the kiddie place. I think that the council should consider any ramifications and the possibility of problems arising in that street.
I thought we spelled out the kiddie place pretty clearly, did it, Mr. Manning?
But they may change their plans and possibly
They said no
cause-
part of their plan would impact, build around or cut homeowners off from the kiddie place. I think they
Wasn't
spelled that.
cutting off, they may have spelled that out, but the problem is, on one of the plans, and I know it's on the lower end, there was no egress. There was no two ways in and out of that section. So I'm thinking that if they do go down to the lower portion, we have to consider the ramifications of kiddie place, which might be irrelevant, but
I think that's all
You never
stuff that
know.
would be addressed in the site plan. You know, at this time, as far as the school, the fire department, all that would be specifically spelled out in the developer's agreement. And I don't think this is not the time to address those, but they would be, the developer's agreement, I'm told, would be, you know, hundreds and hundreds of pages. Everything would be clearly spelled out, and this is just a recommendation for this plan to move forward to the council. So at this time, I think those specific items would not be in this.
okay, but you will include the fire and the schools as a priority?
Well, there's thresholds in the plan that they have to meet to the Board of Education for impact on the school system. That's clearly gonna be spelled out.
It's not a bonus?
In order to get the density,
Okay,
you're gonna have to prove the impact to the schools. That's
Okay.
part of the plan.
okay.
Then what you're saying is that the training and the necessary equipment would not be included?
Not at this time. We spoke to the Belleville Fire Department. They said there would be training and some special equipment that they would need, and that would all be spelled out in the redeveloper's agreement. This is just a basic redevelopment plan for this. All the specific details will be spelled out in detail in the redeveloper's agreement.
And that would be in the contract, I grant that. I'm not too happy about that, but, because I would like to see it, but, also, there was one more thing about the abatement, we discussed that. And I know that's up, to the council too, so,
What it be?
do you have a positive a tax abatement?
That's not part of this redevelopment plan. I guess the council would have to bring that up. That's not our decision.
Is that legally?
Yes,
On all these phases?
yes, that's correct. We would speak.
And so what we're doing, just for clarification for the public, I just would like to have you explain what we're doing, because I know we keep saying we're planning, we're doing, and what we expect. I would like the public to be aware that we're only doing a recommendation and that it's not our decision, because there's been many, things out there in the public, so if you could explain that.
Absolutely. Just to reiterate, the job of this board is to review and decide if they would like to make a certain recommendation for development to the actual governing body. And if they do, they can make this recommendation with certain conditions. They can decide they do not want to make the recommendation, but it's not the function or the job of this particular board to approve any particular plan, any particular vision, any particular specifics that have been brought before us throughout this entire application. So just to make it clear, that should this board decide, after reviewing all of the documentation, listening to all of the testimony and the explanations, if they should decide that it is in the best interest of Belleville to actually recommend this plan with conditions that they feel is appropriate, then they can do so legally speaking. That is the function of this particular board. And that is the limit of their function. Then it will go before the governing body, and they will make actual determinations. A lot of the questions that have been brought up and asked here would be more appropriately brought up before the governing body as their legal function, just to clarify that. Okay?
Mr. Chairman, are we going to make these attachments to the plan?
Yeah, that's,
Do we need to vote on them specifically?
yes, I just said that our recommendation for the Northeast redevelopment plan would include the following 7 items that I just read off. Do you have a question?
I just thought that if we're making, so I'm clear, I understand we're making these recommendations. Would it behoove us to make the recommendations for the school and for the training purposes? What if the council don't ask that or include that?
Part of the redevelopment plan was specific criteria that had to be met in order to get the density, that they have to prove the impact of school children on the schools. And if there was an impact that created overcrowding, that they would have to have a plan. They would have to add classroom space, they would have to have a private school. That's spelled out in this plan. There's education, there's environmental impacts, there's
But that's
traffic
very, it's
studies.
very misleading when you say a private school, because ultimately, when you're talking about a private school, it is not incumbent upon the town to have them go to a private school in Belleville.
Mr. Chairman,
It's only an
will
option
there
for
be any
them
harm
to
to
do
this
that.
rather than making a recommendation to the council? Whether we feel it's needed or not, Mr. Notarado, something she feels strongly about.
Oh, I feel strongly too that if there's an impact on the school system, we don't want the town of Belleville paying for it. And that I thought was spelled out pretty clearly.
I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, I do, but apparently this is, Mr. Notarado feels very strongly about it, and maybe we can just put it in, I don't think it'll cause any harm, the council can reject it, is that true? I don't want to be out of line here.
That's correct. I mean, you can reiterate.
So we
the
can move things
condition.
along.
It's not, because it's included in the entire. It's a condition.
It may be redundant, Ray, I get what you're saying, I understand that, but she feels very strongly about it.
Only because of past practices and certain things have happened through the years.
I
would feel
understand, I
comfortable.
do.
Why can't you just word you have these specific, your 7 specific recommendations, and then also, the
How would you like
board
to-
feels strong that, about the school funding.
Oh, I'm sure everyone feels strongly about it. If you
Yeah,
want to
but
I think she
specifically,
wants that in there, maybe,
okay, how would you like it worded?
I can word it, in the sense that it's strongly suggested that it's a consideration of the board. Because at the end of the day, again, you're not really,
So
you're making this recommendation. So I can word it in that way.
So I read off seven items. So we're going to add an 8th item pertaining to the school systems. And how would you like to have that worded so we can proceed?
Is there a particular way that you would like me to enumerate that for you?
Is there, if there's any additional, any impact on the school system from this project that creates more school children, that it needs additional class space or overcrowding and more teachers?
Right.
the
5
council,
years
the
after
council needs to
capacity.
consider that aspect.
Right.
That's how it should be worded.
And that the fire training and any necessary equipment needed. Well, just,
I think,
And
I
that any
think
and all
that
fire-
that our deputy director is right. It doesn't do any harm to,
Chief.
Chief, sorry, I'm so sorry.
Against that.
But it's
For
meant,
the record.
Mark, it's meant to respect.
I'm joking.
But I think what he said is right. It doesn't do any harm to make that notation to the council. And this way,
That's my feeling, honey, thank you.
All right, so we had these 7 items. All right. We had 7 items that I had read out. We want to add 2 additional items. One of them being the impact of this project on the education system in our town. We want the town council to strongly consider that. And number 9 would be the fire. Any safety or training or equipment needed would be addressed before this project moves forward.
no, not beforehand.
Before, before they start building, they have to
Right.
address,
Will be met accordingly. So will be met. Any of all fire and safety requirements will be met accordingly. Right?
so if someone want to make a motion to recommend the Northeast redevelopment plan with the conditions or with the recommendations that we just said to the council.
Point of order, Mr. Finero. Can the public speak?
No, the
Well,
public,
this-
the public,
But you allowed the witnesses
the
to give
public
further
portion is
testimony.
closed.
You allowed further testimony when you closed at the
answered
last
questions.
meeting. So I think we have a right to
They
speak.
answered deliberations from the council. We closed the public portion, Mr.
But you
President.
then allowed the witnesses to give further testimony. So I think we should be allowed to question the witnesses, or the board, and give further as well. Why are we being denied the opportunity when they were given, the
Yeah,
hearing
Mr.
wasn't
Franklin.
over?
Hold on. Any question?
Do you have a specific question, or do you have a comment?
Both.
Well, we closed the public comment.
But then
If you
you
have a
reopened the
specific
meeting.
question,
You
you can
said
ask a
all
specific-
discussion was over last week.
Yeah, we didn't reopen it. They answered
You
specific
allowed the
questions.
witnesses to get up again.
It has to be officially reopened. It was not officially reopened. If-
We were requested to answer
Right.
questions. That's
During a
all.
deliberation phase from specific questions from the board.
And he gave
We did
additional
not reopen.
testimony,
We did
which
not
was different than
reopen.
what he spoke at the last meeting.
You're allowed to speak. This is a courtesy right now. You're allowed to speak if we reopen. We didn't reopen, and that's procedurally, legally correct.
So someone like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion that it be recommended, that for consideration to the council.
Lois, call roll.
Mr. Vanilla,
Yes.
Mr. Zungri,
Yes.
Mrs. Inaugurata,
Yes.
Mr. Conti,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Medekey.
Yes.
I thank the board for its time and attention, and I ask that if council could possibly send me a copy of that proposed resolution before it's finalized, just for legal input with regard to such as whether or not it was consistent with the master plan and that kind of thing. Thank you.
I think the board also, one of the things that you had to do tonight, besides issue your conditions, is to state how this plan conforms to the master plan or deviates from it. Now, in terms of the Washington Avenue side, it is very consistent with the zoning on that side, which calls for mixed-use development. On the Main Street side, the Finkelstein property, that's in the master plan and the zoning for BF, which is industrial commercial. I will state that the master plan does discuss the fact that the valley is changing and that industry may not be as viable as it used to be, and that some mixed use might be considered in the future. So, but as Mr. Steck said, you'd have to make it, in other words, you really have to clearly say the BF is not, what they're proposing is in the master plan, in the redevelopment plan is not consistent with the master plan, but the board nonetheless recommends it to be considered for mixed use.
Wasn't that included in, wasn't that language included in this?
Well, you are being asked to make that statement. That's one of your primary functions when this is referred to you by the council. You have to, I mean, if you come up with, if you feel that it's not consistent in terms of, I'm talking broadly now, in other words, you may not agree with all the specifics in the plan, but broadly, is this a general direction that the board is comfortable with or not? That's something that I think you want to add on to your resolution.
Yeah, I'll be specific about it in the resolution.
Oh, okay.
Okay? And
Sure.
I'll reiterate what is consistent, what isn't consistent,
Right.
and how.
Okay,
exactly.
and I'll talk to you about that,
Yeah,
too, if you need help on
absolutely.
that. All right.
No further questions? Someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Meeting is adjourned.